Hello, everyone, and welcome to the thru Recovery Life Podcast. Today we have Miss Judy sharing her experience, strength, and hope with us, and here to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So, without further ado, I give you Miss Judy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Judy. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm from Dover, Delaware. Today, I want to focus on the topic, the family afterward. I have lots to share that way, and to prove my qualifiers, I'm a dual member of both Al-Anon and AA. Sometimes they call us a double winner. My first 12-step entry was into Al-Anon in June of 1992. I was there 20 years before I actually joined Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been a continuous member since then. My sobriety date is 5/25/2012. I think it's really important to talk about the family because I have a family of origin, that there was addictions and alcoholism on both sides of the family, both my mother and my father's side, mostly with our cousins and with myself and one of my siblings. And we all qualify, I just want to say, to be in both programs, because in Al-Anon we just help the people that are with families that have alcoholics that are suffering from this disease. So what I like to say is that, so I entered in 1992, and I was in Al-Anon for 10 years before I realized that I was married to one, and it took me another 10 years before I identified as an alcoholic. But it is clearly a family disease. Mostly it happened with my cousins. I definitely lost a cousin when I was at age 17, and he was 19, and he died of an overdose of alcohol and sedatives. I think it's really important to talk about that chapter, the family afterward. I'm going to be honest that when I first came to AA, that was not one that I read in the big book, pages 122 to 135, and I didn't want to actually look at those pages once I was in a couple of years either, and really pay attention to it, because I think it was hard to just to read some of the things that were stated in the chapter. But they're very important, because the same principles that benefit alcoholics can also benefit the family members and friends of alcoholics. One of the things that I know is that we can recover even if we're separated from our own family, or they're not in our lives at all. I know that happened to me, and as I tell my story, there are parts of where that is true. And I also, have seen many AA family members that are very distressed because they have certain family members that are not in their lives, and it makes them sad. But we can recover, because as Bill sees it in page 217, he said, "Let no alcoholic say he cannot recover unless he has his family back. His recovery is not dependent upon people. It is dependent upon his relationship with God, however he may define him." So what I found in my story is that spiritual contact with a higher power is vital to my recovery, very vital to my recovery, and also in the recovery and how it affects my family. Because in that chapter, what I'm going to encourage you to do is read it if you have not read it, and if you have read it again, and highlight the things that speak to you. But one of the things that spoke to me is on page 135, where it's quoted as saying, "Whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic member has to, if he would recover. I have to do the step work. I have to work with a sponsor. I need to do service. I work with sponsees. I have to make my amends. I must change to remain in recovery, because just not drinking is just not enough." And I've been here a few 24s. So I had 20 years in Al-Anon before I came into AA. I now have 10 years plus sober. That's a lot of time. So one of the things I've learned is we repair what we can, accept what we can't, and that, this reconstruction of our lives, and they talk about it in that chapter, and the lives of our family members, it does take time. I mean, the big book tells me that on page 122, that years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. And of course, in this case, or husband, and the entire family is to some extent ill. And that's my family of origin. There was a lot of dysfunction. There was abuse. There was always a feeling of uncomfortability. And then when I married and I had my sons, they grew up definitely with two alcoholic parents. So in this recovery process, I'm always under construction, under reconstruction, not construction, reconstruction. And I'm trying to repair that destruction that, that I left behind me, that's in my past, and hopefully not creating anything but, positive things in each day at a time. But this is a lifetime process. And my sponsor always reminds me regularly to be kind to myself and to always consider the changes I've made since I first walked through the doors of AA. Because I know that when I drank, I didn't just hurt my family, I positively hurt myself too. And she said, as long as you're putting one toe in front of each other, then you're, making that, that smidge of progress. And it's so important, because it benefits not only you, but your family. And so as an AA member each day, I try my best to work my program to the best of my ability daily. But, I have witnessed how things have changed over time with my family members. And I like to just give some examples that I'm really grateful for. Number one thing, a great improvement in my relationship with my mom. We had a very contentious relationship. It was not a positive one. I had a youngest sister that I hadn't talked to in 8 years, or 6 years when I first came into AA. It took 2 more years into my sobriety before we actually connected. And I got to meet her family for the first time and her children. I have more open dialogue with my sons. There is positively less conflict at any family gatherings. There's more family harmony. Is it all fixed and is it perfect? No. Positively not, but what I want to stress is that in recovery, things have changed for the better over time. And of course, one of the ways to get there is doing the step work, particularly the actions that you need to take in the 9th step, because that is crucial and empowering. And it's been that way for my recovery. And not only has it been important that I make my amends, especially to my family members, but it's been necessary to forgive them as well, because there were things. That's what happens in families. We hurt each other. Hurt people. And no matter what has been done to me, I have to own up to my side of the street. I've got to clean it up. And I've got to work this program as it's been designed and as the book lays out for me. After a number of years of sobriety, and during my dad's last year of life, he said to me, Judy, if you can forgive your mom for the things that she did to you, I need to start doing that too. And I am grateful that through forgiveness and through lots of dialogue with my father, that I was able to be a part and impact change, positive change in my family. And I want to stress, though, that the importance of when you're making that amends, you're doing that process, that you really make sure you go through that with a sponsor or a spiritual advisor or some trusted person, because full disclosure about things could seriously harm the ones that you are making the amends to, or even harm yourself. And this is something that my sponsor has, carefully talked to me about. You have to really consider, because in those cases, sometimes the amends can simply be just changing your behavior and doing things differently and not acting as you did before. For example, in that family afterward chapters on pages 124 and 125, they discuss situations where a couple may have even had love affairs. And they say, so we think that unless some good and useful purpose is to be served, past occurrences should not be discussed. So in many cases, alcoholics have survived this ordeal in their relationships with their spouse or significant other, without relapse, but that is not always the case. So sometimes all those ins and outs and every detail of, the various family conflicts that we've experienced does not need to be shared. It's kind of like talking in general terms about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Very important, because this AA way of life has taught me to love and accept my family members as they are. And always to remember that motto, something that really spoke to me the first time I read it in the big book. Love and tolerance is our code. And I heard this speaker once when he was talking about relationships, and he said, well, do you want reactionships or relationships? And today I work hard to have relationships. I work hard because I used to be that mighty reactor. I was the person that, had to defend and react and be right, and fight everybody and everything. Today, I do my best to listen and to respond in that kind and loving manner. Now, this journey with my family and our journeys that we take as members with our family members is not easy. And families that truly wish to heal, I really believe, they cannot hide behind the past of closed doors. That was the ways that I was raised. Better never tell anybody about what's really going on in here. That's, I was never allowed to share, express my feelings, express my anger, my anguish, my anxiety. But in the family afterward on page 123, it says the first impulse will be to bury these skeletons in a dark closet and padlock the door. And the family may be possessed by the idea that future happiness can be based only upon forgetfulness of the past. Now, that is how some of my family members still choose to live. I do have a relationship with my mom today, but I'm still not allowed to talk about the past. But guess what? I accept her the way she is. That's the way it is. And she's not going to change. So the only person that can change is me. And if I don't, so by forgetting my past and not dealing with it, that's in direct conflict with this new way of living that I've learned. But I've also learned how to live with balance. It's important that there's as much balance in my recovery, and then therefore, balance in the family members. And hopefully family members can accept that alcohol takes away the person that they loved. My oldest son used to tell me, when he finally started talking to me after I'd been sober a little while, was, well, Mom, you were there physically, but you just weren't there for me. You were not there. Like your body was there, but you weren't there. Your soul, your mind, your feelings, I wasn't there for him some of the time when he needed. I am there for him today. I have found so much hope in recovery. One of the things that we just read it recently in one of the daily reflections not too long ago, that the alcoholic may find it hard to reestablish friendly relations with his children, but in time that they will see a new man or a new woman in my case, and in their own way they will let him or her know it. And I have examples of that in my recovery, part of my story, in my sobriety. My youngest son was only, I got sober and, they had already been through their teens, and, he was in his early 20s and in college. And he was just home for a break. And we had a disagreement one night. And we had this disagreement, but we had a dialogue. And as he was marching up the stairs to go to bed that night, I said to my son, do you think that I've changed in the way I deal with this disagreement we just had now that I'm sober? And I can still see him on the stairs, turning around and looking at me with this big grin and emphatically saying, "Oh, yeah." And that was just validation enough. And it also meant a lot to me when that same son, who had attended on and off, certainly in the first 5 years of my sobriety, different anniversaries, when, of course, he would hear the Lord's prayer at the end of many of those meetings. And he said to me, "Mom, I forgive you for all of your transgressions." I can still get teary-eyed remembering that moment. Would that have happened if I had not done the step work and I have not dedicated my sobriety as a priority in my life? I don't think so. But even in sobriety, families can struggle, or with family members. And my oldest son, in 2018, I'd already been 6 years sober. And my oldest son chose to not be in my life. In fact, he called me up on the phone. He said, "I'm glad you're not in my life, and I don't want to see you." That was 2018. That's not the case today. It did take some time to make our way back. He was probably the one that was most affected by the alcoholism he grew up with his two parents. He suffered the most damage. And today he's finally recognizing that he needs help. And he's taken some steps to do that, to get the help that he needs. So it did take years before both of my sons actually could have dialogue that we could have that was constructive and without lots of resentment and anger being tossed back and forth. It did take time. I just got to be honest about that, But even now that I'm more than 10 years sober, things still come up occasionally, and they just did not too long ago. It was my oldest son again, and we try to have a weekly dinner with my son and his wife. And we had dinner, and he was peculiarly quiet that night, and I could tell that something was wrong. And I could feel that something was wrong. And I've learned in this program, pay attention to your intuition, because when I was drinking, I ignored things. But I could feel him. I could see that he seemed sad and anxious. And I said to him, "Son, I feel like there's something wrong. Is there something you need to tell me?" And he turned and he looked at me. And at first he said, "I don't think you want to hear it." And I said, "Yes, I do." And then he just said, "You're trying to guilt me over not going to a family gathering. Actually, it's going to be Happy November 6th. I feel like you're making me feel guilty by what you said." Now, it doesn't matter that I have a different perception. What matters is that my son was feeling like I was trying to guilt him into doing something. And at first he was just angry. "Well, that's how you always handle things. You always make me feel guilty about things." And, I just sat there and I let him express whatever feelings he had. I did not react. I did not defend. I sat there. I wanted to hear what he had to say. And, and after he stopped talking, I wanted to validate those feelings, which I did, and own up to what I could, which was, I didn't realize that you felt like I was guilty, number one. And son, this is a safe place. And I want you to know you can say anything you need to say to me, because it's better to express those things than to repress them. And I know that some of it was, some of the things are just past triggers, because, we all need to be mindful of those things, that certain situations set us up for things in the past, especially with our family members. And then, but I said, "I didn't realize you were, that upset you so much. And I'm so sorry. But I'm going to respect your decision for you not to go to the family gathering on November 6th. You know what's best for you." And then things changed. And he just turned to me and said, "You know what, Mom, I'm really being unfair to you, because I was really angry and I didn't tell you about it. And and I was being mad and resentful, and you had no idea that I felt this way." Dialogue is so important. And being honest in our communications with our family members is so important. And I would just like to close with this, short podcast with some things that I hope give you encouragement. And the many Al-Anon meetings that I attended, and I occasionally, once in a while, still attend some virtual Al-Anon meetings. There's always a suggested closing that is usually used. And it ends with, if you keep an open mind, you will find help. You will come to realize that there's no situation too difficult to be bettered and no unhappiness too great to be lessened. Don't give up hope. If you have family members that are out of your life, those of you that are listening today, that's what might be the situation today. But I can say that if you continue on your recovery, stay in your lane, open the door, things can happen. And then finally, there's another quote from, it's also Al-Anon literature, Hope for Today, on page 334. And the quote is, acceptance is a form of living and letting live that frees all concerned to follow their higher power's will. If we live and let live, that frees all of us, your families and friends of alcoholics. And these are things that I've learned in my both programs of recovery. I've learned how to set boundaries. I've learned how to accept and love the people in my life as they are. And I've learned when I've needed to, if I need to take a step back, to detach with love. So I pray that hearing this podcast today and hearing a little bit about my sobriety journey in regards to my family life gives you hope. Stay sober strong, and thank you for listening.
All right, Miss Judy, thank you very much for coming back. When you were here last time, what, a month ago? Maybe a little less than a month ago, and shared your personal story. But
Yes.
yeah, that was great. But thank you for coming back and telling us what it was like with the family afterwards. As we know, this disease affects not just the alcoholic, but their immediate family and maybe even further out. The ripple effect, as Dr. Rockwood mentions. All right, thanks again, Judy.
Thank you, John.
All right, talk to you soon. Have a great day.